Hello and welcome to Cycles of Time, your weekly guide to what's happening on Earth as we make our revolutionary journey around the sun. For time immemorial, our human ancestors have created myths and meanings to help us adapt and thrive as seasons change. Join me each week to explore the intersections of these ancient cycles, from the indigenous medicine wheel to the pagan wheel of the year, the Babylonian and Greek zodiac to the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes. I'm your host, Alison, and this is the Cycles of Time podcast. Hey there, friends. How's everyone doing out there as the cycle of time weaves its way toward autumn? In my last episode, I mentioned I was going to be having a little summer forever party at my house, which we did. And a little update on that is that it was really fun. It was really like a going away party for a beautiful hot summer season. And that day that we had the party last Sunday was a hot and cloudless day filled with pink flamingo headbands and inflatable kiddie pools and a bubble machine and fresh sunflowers in all the vases and watermelon and pasta salad on colorful paper plates, and it really just evoked summer. And it was just, a lot of kids and grown-ups came and wore swimsuits and hung out under umbrellas for shade and splashed in the cold plunge and threw water balloons, and it was a summery time. And then the morning after that, the start of last week, I woke up shivering, didn't have enough covers, and I was actually really cold. So it was almost like summer had permission to leave after that party. It was like a going away party for summer. And I think I want to do that every year now, just really go out with a bang as fall really arrives. I've been walking my dogs every morning around the block, and I'll feel like this hot, hot sun on my back and a kind of a cold wind on my front, and it's really hard to dress for the occasion right now because it's still hot on one side and cold on the other. Like, truly very interesting phenomena. So yeah, fall is coming, but not quite. We're in this transitional time, and we're going to talk a lot about transitions in this episode and transmutations, transfigurations, lots of word for these changes that are coming and that are really felt in this season. My partner last week had planned a backpacking trip that he does every late summer up to the high country. He goes on a solo backpack every year since he was 17, but by the time he had space to go last week, there was snow and thunderstorms, kind of hail predicted, hitting the peaks that he was wanting to climb. So I spent some time with him last week where he just felt really sad and really down in not getting to do this annual adventure because the seasons changed a little quicker than anticipated and a lot of things came up beforehand, and it just really, climbing high peaks really rushes the season. You can't linger onto it if it's already snowing up there. And so it really, I felt through him this real end of a season and the kind of bittersweetness and sadness that can come with that. Not just because it was a missed opportunity to do something that he liked to do, but also it just was ringing in the beginning of this season of upcoming cold months and dark months where doing something like that, climbing a mountain peak and camping is not really possible. I'm sure some people do it, but not very comfortably. So I'm curious how you guys feel when summer ends. Is anybody feeling the sadness or kind of a melancholic vibe right now? Curious how you're all feeling. It's definitely hitting me a little bit. I think it's natural to feel grief when the first freeze hits, and when the bounty of the growing and living world starts to droop and fall into the fall. It kind of brings up questions like, have we done enough? Have we seized enough sunlight? Do we have enough sustenance to get through the winter? I think it's deep in our genetics that we have these questions, even if we're not consciously asking them. There's a certain amount of fear that comes in, and grief at the same time about, okay, are we ready for these months that are not as bountiful? I think that, these days we are a little less tethered to literal survival through the cold months, but it still affects our psyches, this kind of shortening of the days and the drying of the flowers on their stems. It's reminding us of the continuous death and grief that the world is holding right now and always, but right now especially so. It seems like right now there's a little more hope going into this fall season than I was anticipating back in the spring, especially here in the U.S. with the Kamala Harris wild card on presidential candidacy. Can't imagine if she hadn't entered the race, how people would be feeling right now. But, things are always changing. But I think even with a little bit more hope going into the fall, there's definitely a natural slowing down of the season that is filling a lot of us with kind of a reawakening of realizations about the world we live in, and how much work it really needs, how much love it needs, how much attention it needs. So this fall's astrology, beyond the normal felt sense of seasonal change, is also filled with transformational transits and events in the skies this year. We have a lunar eclipse in Pisces next week, and then a solar eclipse in Libra on October 2nd. And eclipses are times of radical transformation as well. As the moon waxes its way full after last week's Virgo new moon, this week before the eclipses begin is already considered eclipse season. So in this episode, we'll chat a little bit about what to expect over the next month's lunations. And a little quick tip is no manifesting during eclipse season. That's not a good time to do that. And I also want to talk about a little bit about the approaching season of metal in the Chinese 5-element whooshing cycle. And metal is associated with autumn and with the Western direction of adulthood and emotionality from the medicine wheel. And then lastly on the episode, we'll dig into the human design gate of the week, which is the gate of realization, gate 47, where the sun's going to be transiting from today, Monday, through Saturday. This episode is coming out a day after my birthday, so I wanted to take a moment to say thanks for all the birthday wishes and notes. It was super fun to hear many of your thoughts and reflections on my birthday gate, gate 64, the gate of confusion and imagination, which we transited through last week, and how it's shown up for you in your world. I really just enjoyed getting to that last gate to be able to think about the whole I Ching and the whole human design system, this entirety of the wheel through the lens of getting to completion and then starting all over. It really evoked the cyclical nature of things. So it was fun to see how people responded to that. And, confusion is like, yeah, I don't think anybody likes to be confused. It's definitely a confusing time to be alive. And it's a time that requires exercising the muscles of our imagination on a pretty constant basis to imagine a better world for us all. And so I'm really happy. I feel very privileged as I turn 41 to be sitting here in my studio, having conversations, and just doing this work of imagination and tapping into time the way that I'm able to here with all of you this week. So thanks so much for being here. It means a lot that you are spending these, an hour each week with me. Truly, truly. This week, our highlights are we are preparing for eclipse season. We're entering the season of metal in the Taoist 5-phase whooshing cycle. And from Monday through Saturday, we're in gate 47 in the I Ching, the gate of realization. And on Sunday, we'll be entering the gate of friction, gate 6. And we'll have more on that next week. This week's themes, like I've already kind of mentioned, are realizations, coming to terms with reality, whatever that might mean for us after a week of confusion, kind of editing down the infinite potential into meaning for ourselves. Also, transmutation and transfiguration and transition is another big theme this week. And kind of autumn arriving with metal, and we'll talk about that coming up, about what exactly that means as it relates to grief and letting go, and kind of the alchemical process that grief and letting go and letting things be realized and reborn. So it's a pretty magical week ahead. Looking at the cycles of time wheel of the year, on the inner ring, we are in the medicine wheel direction west, which represents water and adulthood and emotionality. We are in the whooshing cycle element, kind of transitioning from the season of earth, which is late summer, into the season of metal, which is the autumn season. We're in the pagan season of Lammas still, kind of coming up on Mebon, which is the spring or the fall equinox, rather. The zodiac season of Virgo, and that's from August 21st to September 22nd. We're in the moon phase waxing. We're in the I Ching hexagram and human design gate 47 and into gate 6 on Sunday. And again, that is the gate of realization, and then entering the gate of friction. So we will start out talking about the whooshing season of metal. And the whooshing cycle is a elemental phase-based cycle that is used readily in traditional Chinese medicine, as well as Qigong and Tai Chi and Kung Fu and different martial arts. And it is a beautiful system that I love so much. And within that wheel, there's no definitive date or moment when the seasonal or elemental phases shift. It's not like associated with an equinox or a solstice, the way that the medicine wheel and the pagan wheel of the year are, or even the tropical zodiac. But it's more phase-based. It's more, it's really emphasizing the fact that one season fades into another, and there isn't a clear and cut line between them. So I'm talking about metal today because although it's not quite the fall equinox yet, and we're not quite moving into fall in earnest, there is that feeling in the air that a different season has arrived, and a certain psychological sentiment as well of grief that I have heard coming up kind of just in the ether from my peers and friends, and just really hearing how people are feeling that something is shifting. So the whooshing cycle is really it's an embodied system where, because it's used in Chinese medicine and in embodied systems like Qigong, it is a lot about how we're feeling in our bodies. And so from where I stand, here in the high desert of northern New Mexico, the brief season of rich and fertile earth that's evoked by late summer really does seem to be fading into the season of metal. And in traditional Chinese medicine, metal is the element of contraction, dryness, and moving inward. In the body, the organs associated with metal are the lungs and the large intestine. And those are both parts of the body that are more vulnerable during this time of seasonal transition. Definitely a lot of kind of respiratory stuff going around. I know COVID is spiking, and I know a lot of people who have had it. So, take care out there and mask up, and just know that there is a certain vulnerability during a transitional season like this to, especially at this season, respiratory and digestive issues. I think that these associations between these body parts and the season of metal are interesting because in astrology, both the lungs and the large intestine are governed by signs that are ruled by Mercury. And those signs are Virgo and Gemini. So we're currently in the season of Virgo, as you know, and Virgo rules the intestine, which is responsible for the discernment and digesting and processing of the food we eat and what we drink. And then Gemini, the other sign ruled by Mercury, rules the lungs, which are responsible for filtering, absorbing, and processing the air we breathe. So as we enter metal, this kind of inward contracted season where we're coming out of the bounty of summer and moving into the more yin inward season, there's a lot of filtering and processing and discernment and digesting that we're doing through both of these organs. So I think that's super fascinating. I'm traveling this week and visiting family in Oregon where, so it's kind of allowing me a little bit, slight extension of summer vacation vibes, of the season of Earth vibes than I was feeling in New Mexico, because Oregon has just a lot of bounty as far as fruits and vegetables and just produce and the feeling of bounty. So that's still happening here in September. So again, this just is to say that there is no clear-cut definition of when one season ends and another begins per se, unless it's aligned with an astronomical event like the solstice. But when it comes to these beautiful metaphors and associated symbols of the seasons, it's kind of like heading into metal and then going back a little bit into the earth season. But I decided to come up for a week up to Oregon to ring in my birthday and be with my grandmother, who's 98, and just kind of connect with the land where my parents grew up, and many of my ancestors came before me, going way, way back. And so because there's so much history and family ties, the visits here that I make about once a year always do require a lot of the digestion and processing and absorbing of the season of metal. So although the land around still feels quite like the bounty of late summer's earth, there's a certain emotional side of this visit and this time of year here for me specifically that really feels like, just thinking about where I come from, where my family comes from, what their experiences have been. And last year I came up here for a visit on my birthday as well. And that was a kind of last minute decision to go last year. I wanted to bring my daughter to an annual Labor Day camp out that my extended family has been doing for decades. And I rarely got to attend that annual camp out because I grew up in New Mexico and school started there before Labor Day, so I could never really make it up. I think I came once when I was in high school and jumped off a giant bridge at Detroit Lake, and it was super fun, good memories. But last year I just had this last minute gut instinct that I needed to come up for the camp out. And so I got to celebrate my birthday last year up in Oregon with my aunt Kathy and my cousin Justin, who both share my birthday on September 8th. And we had a really good time. It was a big family reunion, lots of games and lots of mud play. And my daughter got to meet my cousin's kids, and I got to paddleboard and share games around the fire, and it was a super fun time. And then earlier this year, my aunt, who shares my birthday, passed away, and that was just a couple of months before her daughter's wedding that I'm up here for this year. So in tune with the metal being a season of grief, it's definitely been a grief-filled time, and there's grief surrounding this trip, and it's just made me feel so grateful for my impromptu visit last year and trusting my gut that there was a reason that I wanted to come. And it was so lovely to spend that quality time with the whole family together last year. And so this family wedding this year will definitely be tinged with both joy, a lot of joy, and some sorrow, to be sure. So I'm just really grateful to be able to be here for it. And so, it's just how do these things come up in our lives beyond the season, beyond the immediacy of our embodied feelings? There's oftentimes something else that's coming along with it. In the season of metal, the metal element, and the lungs especially, are associated with grief and sorrow and sadness. And grief goes hand in hand with loss and also with change. And that can be changes to our relationships and our lifestyles and our family structures and our situations. And just the seasons themselves can bring up feelings of sadness. The other organ ruled by the metal element, the large intestine, is associated with letting go, which is kind of an obvious one. But it's letting go both physically and mentally. Leah Darnowski from Chrysalis Chinese Medicine states that this letting go can relate to any emotion, but is particularly potent when working with grief and sadness. As we look to nature in autumn, we see the trees letting go of their leaves, ready for death and rebirth. Autumn is a fantastic time to reflect on what is no longer needed in our life, and to let go of what no longer serves our greater good. This can be big things like a person, a relationship, or a job, or smaller things like letting go of a belief we hold about ourselves, certain emotions, or spending time decluttering our homes. When it comes to supporting our lungs and large intestines, especially through autumn, remember to take it easy and take it slow. In the excess of the emotions, it's the excess of these emotions that weakens these organs, and feeling these emotions is completely natural. Feeling some sadness and grief in the current situation is completely normal, but it's when this emotion is controlling your life that it's time to reflect. Same with letting go. It's natural for us as humans to resist certain changes in our lives, but when we hold on to those to our detriment, it starts to become unhealthy. So with the Wuxing season of metal upon us, corresponding with Virgo season and adulthood and emotional processing, give yourself some space and time this week and in the months ahead to grieve and to digest and to process and to release. And speaking of releasing, we've officially entered eclipse season. So this is the beginning of one of the twice annual periods that promise us radical changes, unexpected revelations, and big releases of what's no longer serving us, kind of beyond our control. Astronomically, eclipse seasons are the only times of the year when the sun, from the perspective of us here on Earth, is close enough to one of the moon's nodes to allow an eclipse to occur. So during the season, whenever there's a full moon, a lunar eclipse may occur, and whenever there's a new moon, a solar eclipse may occur. An eclipse season lasts about 35 days and repeats just short of 6 months later, 173 days later. So there are 2 full eclipse seasons every single year, and either 2 or 3 eclipses happen in each eclipse season. So that's a lot of astronomy there for you. There's a diagram on the Astrosomatics Substack of this, and you can also just Google it, eclipse diagram. It's pretty helpful to see kind of this window in which the sun and the lunar nodes are close enough together to make eclipses happen. So, lunar eclipses always happen on full moons. I'm just stating this. Some of you may know this information, but I like to reiterate because this is the kind of stuff that I didn't know for the longest time. And once I knew it, I was just like, yes, everything makes so much more sense. But yeah, lunar eclipses always happen on full moons when the Earth is between the sun and the moon and the Earth's shadow overcomes the full moon's light. And then solar eclipses always happen on new moons when the moon is between the sun and the earth, and the moon's size is the perfect ratio of the sun to block its rays completely in a total eclipse. And eclipses can be partial, annular, which is also known as the ring of fire eclipse, or total, and that depends on the degree of the lunation, like how exact the sun and the moon's nodes are lined up. Astrologically, I like to think of eclipses as supercharged new and full moons. Most full and new moons, I will say, are ripe times for ritual and manifestation and reflection, and kind of conscious processing, like where the conscious of the sun meets the subconscious of the moon. And it's like this beautiful time to reflect on that. But during eclipses, they're noted as times to open yourself up to receive messages from the universe without trying to manifest or control the outcome. So it's generally advised by most astrologers that I respect to not do any ritual or manifestation on eclipses, especially manifestation trying to encourage something to happen or asking the universe for something to happen. Ritual, as far as a receiving ritual, would be fine, but nothing that's really trying to set up conditions for something to happen, because eclipses are, twice a year, just short periods of time, twice a year, where we can kind of act like antennas and welcome whatever comes in. And I think a great metaphor for eclipses is that they're like the power going out in a building, like power going out in your house. And then when the lights come back on, you perceive the world in a totally different way. Almost like all the furniture has been rearranged during the blackout or something. You're having a heightened sense of attunement to what is different and what has changed. And so for this reason, eclipses can be shocking times. And so some people are just like, oh no, eclipse season is here. There's a lot of great memes about that. If you just search hashtag eclipse season on Instagram or TikTok, there's definitely a lot of stuff out there. But I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. I think that eclipses can bring definitely realizations, revelations, and quantum leaps that are important to our evolution as humans, where we kind of are taken out of the linear timeline of our lives so that we can gain new perspectives. And so I'm gonna, try to welcome. It's like the season of metal, the eclipse seasons. There's like, it's the letting go and the grief and the quantum potential of that is all very ripe right now. Next week's episode is going to focus on the first eclipse of the season, which is a partial full moon lunar eclipse in Pisces, and that's happening on Tuesday, September 17th, or Wednesday, September 18th, depending on your time zone. But it'll be happening next week. And then 2 weeks after that, on October 2nd, we will experience an annular new moon solar eclipse in Libra. And just a final word on eclipses, for those curious. Eclipses happen along the binary axis of the nodes of the moon. So the nodes of the moon, the north node and south node, are always located in opposite signs and in opposite gates and in just complete polar opposite sides of the sky. And the nodes are basically the points in space where the orbit of the sun and the orbit of the moon meet in the ecliptic. And this year, the nodes are shifting from the axis of Aries Libra, where they've been over the past year, to Pisces Virgo, where they'll be for the next 18 months. And the Aries Libra axis is one that focuses on me versus we, selfhood, which is Aries, versus relationships, which is Libra. And then the next axis will be Pisces Virgo, which focuses on spiritual understanding through either breaking things down in the case of Virgo or merging things together in the case of Pisces. So all of these axes, as you've probably heard me talk about if you're a longtime listener, fascinated by the axes of the zodiac and the axes of the I Ching as well, just kind of what is on the opposite side of the wheel and how can we learn about the similarities and differences. And so the nodes of the moon are very important in that way. And oftentimes in our birth chart, the north node and south node represent kind of what we're hungry for versus what we need to release, what we're familiar with in the south node versus what we're striving towards with the north node. And so eclipses are, another thing that highlight the nodal axis there. So we'll dive more into the specifics of how these eclipses will affect you and what micro season or human design gate they are in over the next several episodes. But for now, just know that if you're feeling transmutative and grieving the past while anticipating the future, or if you're facing some reality checks, or just feeling a little out of sorts, the current skies and the current season can really provide a good reason why. Moving on a little bit here now to the final chapter of this episode, which is about gate 47, the gate of realization and transmutation, which really just feels on point with the realizations of metal. Metal is a hard object where water condenses on it, and it's something that is metal is alchemical. So there's a lot of similarities between this gate and the season of metal, as well as the kind of eclipse vibes that we talked about. So after downloads of raw inspiration from above and the visual imagination and confusion from last week's gate 64, we have gate 47 coming in next. And it's kind of like a film editor that cuts and chops all of that abundance of raw data into a cohesive storyline. It's a gate 47 is all about transmuting the energy of oppressive confusion, anything that feels like too much, and a kind of a trapping, being trapped by it too much, like a agoraphobia, claustrophobia kind of situation. And so it takes that confusion and transmutes it into profound realizations that can transfigure us at a foundational level. And this gate is deeply connected to last week's energy, gate 64's gate of confusion. And that's not just because it comes after gate 64 in the Wheel of the Year. The Wheel of the Year has a certain sequence called the Fuxi sequence. When you look at the human design wheel or the cycles of time diagram wheel, that sequence is an ancient sequence of the I Ching. But also, in human design, gate 47 and 64 together complete the channel of abstraction in the human design body graph, and that connects the head and the ajna energy centers together in the body. So just a quick aside for those of you new to human design, or newish or curious. Basically, all of the 64 ancient I Ching hexagram symbols and meanings are correlated with the seasons of the year around the wheel, which is what I've been focusing on this podcast specifically. But in addition to that, within the human design system, each of those 64 hexagrams or 64 gates are also correlated with energy centers in the body, the human body. And that's kind of based on the Hindu Brahmin chakra system. And as you can see in the image below, if you're reading through, I have an image of a human design chart, but you can look at any human design chart that has the wheel around it, the mandala around it. And you can see that gate 64 is in the head energy center at the very top of the chart. And gate 47 connects to it in the ajna or third eye chakra center, which is right below it. So if you'd like to follow along with your own human design chart and see what gates you have active as I speak about them week by week, it makes it a very personal experience to kind of know like, oh, you're talking about my Venus gate or you're talking about my moon gate. You can always get your free human design chart at a lot of places online. I definitely recommend downloading the Neutrino Design app for an iPhone or Android or on a desktop. Neutrino lets you see the gates in your body graph along the gates highlighted along the Wheel of the Year and the I Ching hexagrams, and you can also save charts to the app and have them right on your phone. So you could also book a reading with me if you want to get an overview of your human design chart, and I'm going to be by the time I put this episode up, I'm going to be putting out a schedule for some bookings if you want to take a look into your chart as it relates to the cycles of time. So anyway, that's a little aside. It just all that to say that 64 and 47 are connected in the sequence of time in the seasonal wheel of the year, and also how they're laid out in the body. And I don't have gate 47 active in my chart, but so I don't have this full channel of abstraction. I just have a hanging gate 64 is what they call it, which means that it's kind of like always looking for the other piece of that channel, maybe. So I did find out, I just discovered that gate 47, the gate of this week, is my daughter's rising sign gate. And I knew my daughter was a Virgo rising, so I was curious kind of which slice or micro season of the sign of Virgo was rising over the horizon when she was born. And so I started listening to the Gene Keys audiobook for Gate 47, as I do every week, to get that download. And I just was thinking as it was transmissioning through, I was like, this is so my kid. And so then I looked up her chart and confirmed that her rising sign is the Gate of Realization. And just to note, in traditional human design, the rising sign is not included as a factor in the chart, but as an astrologer, I do love to include the rising sign and see what energies show up in that gate. Like our rising signs are all about kind of how we shine into the world, how we're perceived by others. What is kind of like radiating out from us. And so I'm always just curious how that energy shows up in the specificity of the season. So the Gate of Realization is my kid, and it matches up with the Gate of Confusion, and that feels really meaningful to me. One thing that I love about looking at the body graph in human design is this ability to create composite charts where you're essentially overlaying two people's charts on top of each other, kind of like a synastry chart in astrology, and then noting the connections between those charts. So in a synastry astrology chart, you're looking at two people's charts and what aspects, squares, oppositions, trines, conjunctions are formed between the planets. And that's a super cool practice as well. But in the human design, the energy centers are all connected by these like channels, which are kind of like tree of life connections between each of the centers. And so they make it really easy visually without having to look at the aspects, which gates, like which active planetary configurations in my chart versus somebody else's chart, kind of how they align and how they interact with somebody else's gates. So I will say that learning about composite charts and viewing collaborations and partnerships through this lens over the past few years has definitely really helped me in my relationships. And it's something that I'm excited to get into offering readings on, because life is all about relationships, right? And how we show up for each other and enhance each other's lives. So in this case that we're talking about here, my daughter's Gate 47 rising sign connects to my Gate 64 sun sign in the body graph chart. And when two gates meet together, they create channels. And there are 36 channels in the human design chart made up from the 64 gates, connecting the energy centers in the body together through the deeper meanings of the I Ching. So when my daughter and I are together and we bring these energies together, our two gates create a complete and connected channel of abstraction. And this channel represents a deep mental process from conceptualizing ideas in abstract forms to understanding them on a practical level. As such, individuals with this channel often exhibit a strong ability to grasp complex concepts and view situations from unique and abstract perspectives. So I bring the confusion and imagination, raw downloads of the 64, and she brings the editing and realizations and epiphanies of the 47. I've always thought of my little one being It's somebody who came into my life for a reason. It's just really felt that way, as many parents feel, I'm sure. But learning that we have these two complementary gates in our charts felt really nice, and kind of just like me downloading the raw imaginal cells of imagination, and she's transmuting them into something meaningful for me, for her, who knows, but it sounds right based on our dynamic. A little more about gate 47. It's composed about the hexagram 47 is composed of the two trigrams, lake over water, in the I Ching, and it's known as something that sounds kind of ominous, which is confinement or oppression. And the ancient Chinese character shows a tree within an enclosure, and it's kind of like the symbol is of a joyous lake being drained by the endless abyss of water below, like an underground river. There's a quote from Café au Sol, who writes about the I Ching, that says, "The joyous lake is dispersing water into the abysmal water below. Since both bodies of water tend to move downward, eventually the lake is drained. There is no water in the lake, and when oppression appears, you can lose your joy and consider giving up. The lake represents a sense of trying to contain fulfillment, while the abysmal water suggests a source that is inexhaustible. Its message is that when you tend to attach yourself to what can be held within the hand, you cannot know today what will come to fulfill you tomorrow. Like an ocean that cannot be depleted because all streams lead back to it, you access a source within that is inexhaustible. It is inexhaustible only when you do not try to contain it. In giving, it is only when there are strings attached that we become exhausted. The hidden influence of family shows us the proper way to support others, as if everyone is our family." So it's a family-related gate, which I think is also pretty special, having it in my combined chart with my daughter. And it's basically about, not having strings attached and not feeling, it's a change of perspective from feeling oppressed by the constant giving, and the realizations that in life we have to constantly be giving, but knowing that can only exhaust us if we are thinking of it as like a tit for tat situation. So if we think of everybody as a family member that we want to give to, that's like this unconditional giving and unconditional love, we're going to want to keep giving and not seeing the river flowing below the lake as a drain, but more so as an continuously replenishing and mutually receptive type of energy. In the gene keys, gene key 47, shadow is oppression, tying back into that I Ching oppression, and its gift is transmutation, and its city is transfiguration. And just as this September Virgo metal west season is bringing transition and change with it, within astrology and the whooshing cycle and the medicine wheel, this 47 micro season of the I Ching also deeply indicates a period of kind of discomfort, and a place where the discomfort being a place where we learn the deepest truths, like within our grief, within our knowing that things need to be let go, within our endless giving towards cleaning things up, decluttering the house. And like right now, my partner is busy cleaning up the side yard and ripping up a carpet, and they're about to start work on the mountain road here in Santa Fe for the next month, which is aspen season. And it's beautiful up in the mountains. It's a time when people love to go up and play, but it's also the only month before the snows come that they can do road work, which is desperately needed. So they're going to be closing up the road to do that. So, that's kind of the vibe of right now. I felt some grief when I heard that. I was like, no, it's going to be so crowded when you can get up that road. And, there's not really a back way. It's like the singular mountain road. So anyway, it's that kind of like, a lot needs to be done. And it feels kind of oppressive to be like, can't we just enjoy this? But there is something within oppression that leads us to transmute that energy. And I'll talk about that a little bit now. The bottom line is that our oppression the particular nuances and flavors of our suffering and karma during this lifetime are exactly equivalent to the greatness of our inner light. Their purpose is to awaken that light. So suffering awakens light. Yes, that is from Richard Rudd in the 64 Ways. The Gene Keys describes Gate 47 as the process of following the script of the dark, non-coding, or junk DNA in our genome. And Gene Keys is all about the genetic correspondences to the I Ching. And so I'll go off on that one day. I do plan next year to have a lot more episodes that are just like not necessarily a weekly forecast, but a little bit of like a deep dive into I Ching, Gene Keys, human design, astrology, wuxing. I mean, I think each one of these could be an indefinite research project and a passion project. But as I'm trying to look at all of them simultaneously, I definitely want to start giving more insights, and I'll do that soon into the depth of the background behind each system that I'm talking about here. But anyway, the Gene Keys, for now, I'll just say, is concerned with the genetics, the genome of the 64 hexagrams. And for those of you who are familiar with genetics, 64 is a big number in the genetic code because there are 64 possible permutations or combinations of the nucleotide sequences that can be made from the 4 nucleotides. So out of the 64, there are 61 amino acids and 3 stop signals. And so those are very correlated, and that's where that all comes from. But we won't go too deep into that today. But just know that because they're talking about junk DNA, and there are a lot of parts of our DNA that is non-coding DNA, does not code for an amino acid, and so it's been considered junk DNA, and that I think is junk does not seem like a nice word to call it, because it's not actually junk. It is responsible for turning on and off the expression of different genes, and there's a lot more that's being discovered, of course, about the genetic code than we can even imagine. And so but Gate 47, according to the Gene Keys, is a script that is deep beneath the surface, beyond the kind of ready expressions of the genetic code, and kind of getting into this non-coding DNA in our genome. So it's about transmutation, and geneticists know that all of life arises through the process of mutation. But before the science of genetics was kind of discovered, the word transmutation was associated purely with alchemy. And alchemy is the complete changing of one element into another. The alchemy is considered the royal art. And it has also been called the art of living dangerously, in the sense that within alchemy, we are truly alive. We're holding back nothing and embracing everything, and knowing that there's always something more, that there is true potential. Alchemy is a process of small and finite mutations which lead to noticeable transmutations, or kind of quantum leaps. But it's all this continuous process of little mutations happening until there's a point where it feels like, oh, here's a big mutation that's visible. So this gate, in that way, is about taking the lid off of our personal Pandora's box and shedding illusions and fears so that we can align with the wider levels of reality, realizing that we're more than our fears and more than the things that we blame our oppressions on. We need to embrace suffering and oppression by immersing into it and surrendering into it in order to rise out of it on a personal level. At the city level, the 47th city is called transfiguration. And this can be, in the Gene Keys, it's mythologically aligned with the resurrection of Jesus Christ as he came back from death and into life. And ancient Tibetans and Taoists and many other cultures have a lot of records of masters who have attained states of transfiguration as well. These are individuals who have kind of attained a resurrected light frequency. And in the Gene Keys, it says that the ultimate purpose of non-coding or junk DNA is revealed in the 47th city. In the Gene Keys, Richard Rudd says, the force of transmutation strips you emotionally and mentally to such an extent that it eventually reaches down into the physical matter of your body. The power of the myth then takes over, and the very cells of your body begin to transmute into the pure light frequencies from which they are made. The elements that make up your body were made in stars, and you turn back into a star in your own mini supernova. This is the final state described by the alchemists, unio mystica, or sacred marriage, in which all your constituent elements dissolve back into one another, and out of your base matter, symbolic gold is formed. I'll just give you a minute to soak that in. I was listening to it and I was like, oh wow, that's some deep stuff right there. Like this gate that we're in right now. In this approaching season of metal and eclipse season, we are in this alchemical world of, big leaps happening through sinking into the darkness, through allowing ourselves to grieve, through allowing ourselves to process and to realize things that are maybe not easy to realize. Not everything that comes out of confusion is like a unicorn rainbow. There can be some harsh reality checks coming up this week. And so I just really loved this. I loved seeing that, the elements are making in your body were made in stars. This is very personal to me because my Burning Man camp, I don't go to Burning Man anymore because baby child. But when I did go, I was with a camp called Star Barf. And it was mostly called that because they didn't have a very specific theme. Everybody had different gifts that they were sharing and different talents. And so it kind of was like, well, what's our bottom line? What's our combination? And it was that we're all made of star stuff, right? We're all made of star barf. And we had a big logo of a star, throwing up a rainbow, barfing out a rainbow. And Star Barf lives. So I think about, anytime I think of anything about being made of star stuff and turning back into that star stuff, I think of Star Barf. So hi, Star Barfers, if you're out there listening, Star Bafarians, as we were called at Burning Man. Yeah, it's stars barfing stars. That's the nature of the universe. But I digress. Stars. Yes, we are in our own supernova, forming gold out of infinite possibility. I love it. And as another little aside, because I'm just getting personal here in this episode, I am going to go back to my daughter's rising gate because I just learned a lot about her that felt so true through this process of digging into the Gene Keys here. But my daughter's rising gate, 47, is one of transfiguration and mutation. And also her sun sign, Scorpio, and her sun gate, which is the gate of insight and breakthrough, are also deeply transformational energies, transmutative energies. So she's a wonderfully, beautifully intense child, and she has a lot of transformational power within her, I can tell. And so when I found out about this, it really sunk in. And it took me back to when I found out that I was pregnant with her back in 2018, and I found out she was going to be born in the month of Scorpio. I did some research and learned that Scorpio is the only sign in the zodiac that is represented by the transmutation between 3 different totems. So most signs only have one totem, the crab, the lion, right? But Scorpio actually has 3, which are the scorpion, the eagle, and in some traditions, it's known as the snake, that middle one, and the phoenix. But scorpion, eagle, phoenix. And the energy of Scorpio, which is a sign that naturally rules the 8th house of taboos and sex, death, and resurrection. It's all about transforming energy from the hidden depths of our experiences into a all-knowing kind of spiritual realm. So I've known that since I was pregnant, of kind of carrying this baby that was like, okay, that sounds like, everybody has an opinion about a Scorpio, but knowing that it's this transmutative, transformational, mutational energy was really interesting to me, because this also comes up with this rising gate in Virgo season. And her sun gate, also within Scorpio season, is known as the gate of the rebel, and it's characterized by gaining insight and awareness kind of seemingly out of nowhere, and then being very sure about that being the truth, even if other people are doubting, so it's a bit rebellious. And then this rising gate, this week's gate 47, is similarly about transmuting oppression and darkness into beauty and wisdom. So on the same day that I found out I was carrying her in my womb, I decided to name her Tala, which means bright star, or the goddess of the morning and the evening star in Tagalog, which is her father's ancestral language. And Tala also means to blossom in Finnish, which is the language of my ancestors, and it means gold in Persian. So all of those things, blossoming into this, the star and the gold, feels very on point with everything from this Gene Keys key, this gate, with alchemy being the central focus. So, I'd have to say that it's my goal to rise to the occasion as a parent. Definitely a big life goal right there. And there was just a study that came out about parenting being really stressful, and I don't think I even need to go into details, but it was widely shared on social media by parents I know that were like, duh. But it was just talking about how they've done, a longitudinal study of parenting and just how hard it is, how stressful it can be to raise little beings into humans. But it also is a beautiful process, and I think that most parents would agree with the suffering comes with the light, as we're talking about in this gate this week. The limitations and the oppression of like not being able to do certain things or having to do certain things for another person above yourself. That is what leads to kind of a more of a refinement of what it is that is truly meaningful, at least for me. I say that especially on the hardest days. But, having this child that is Scorpion, Eagle to Phoenix, and helping her navigate from oppression to the embodiment of a starry, golden, alchemical light seems like a good task for the rest of my life, without putting too much of myself into it. But as for her, without me giving her too much, she knows that she's named after the bright star, the morning and evening star, which is also, as you know, the planet Venus. So she knows that Venus is her planet, her star, that we can see. And lately, every night before bed, she's been going outside to say goodnight to her star, because Venus is back in its evening star phase and is the first. You can see Venus out in my backyard in the western sky, just above the horizon, when the sun is just casting its final golden orange glow into the sky. And she knows it, and she's discovered that and is back out there saying goodnight to her star. And it's really sweet. She has like this wild imagination, beautiful imagination, and the things that she says in play about connecting to the spirits and the ancestors are truly mind-blowing to me sometimes. Oftentimes she'll lead statements with, "When I was a star," and she'll talk about things like how she used to swim with manta rays deep in the ocean before she was born when she was a star. And she has this world that she goes to every night when she's sleeping, which is an underground world where everything is reversed and backwards. It's called Super Spider Land. And it's just this amazing story that's been ongoing for years, maybe about a year now, where I'll be like, hey, we're going to this new place. And she's like, oh, I've already been there. I went there in the night. I went there when I was a star. And so this is her in a nutshell. It's kind of amazing. And sometimes, for being the gate of realization, it's like her realizations are fantastical realizations, which is pretty cool. So yeah, when I read the Gene Keys interpretation of this rising sign gate, talking about alchemically turning back into a star in your own mini supernova, in that process of transfiguration, I was more than a little touched. I was like, wow, that's powerful. As challenging as some of her deep and raw and feelings and her insistent and stubborn knowings of things can be to work with sometimes, being a mom of such a little star child has definitely made it impossible to not find deep purpose and meaning in life. And it definitely grounds my birthday gate of confusion and imagination into really powerful realizations. And that's done when she affirms without any question how truly real the notion of infinite potential really is. She makes real the imaginative qualities that I have. She, I think a lot of 5-year-olds do that for us. They're like, no, yeah, that's real. This is actually not a story. This is a real thing. I am connected to my ancestors. I'm connected to the animals and the spirits and the stars and the universe and the cycles. And so I love that. I just love that I have a little being to help me make these realizations in the week of realization. It's a trip for sure. So I will stop there. That wraps up a week of realizations, transmutations, and welcomes us into the season of eclipses and the element metal. So I would absolutely love to hear how this is hitting in your life. What kind of alchemical processes are happening in your world right now as the seasons change. And this gate of realizations, the oppression and transmutation gene key, is going to take us through Saturday. And then on Sunday, we're going to enter gate 6, which is the gate of friction. And so it's similar in the sense that it is kind of about conflict leading to diplomacy in the way that oppression leads us to transmute into an alchemical golden process. And so, none of this is to say that these seasonal changes are easy. So give yourself some love and some rest and some breaks. Even though it's like back to school, hit it hard time, plan all your launches and whatnot, it's also a good time to really take care of your body, your lungs, and your large intestine in particular. So yeah, we'll talk more about the vibes of gate 6 next week and how they beautifully correlate with the lunar eclipse in Pisces on Tuesday. And until then, thanks for reading and listening and sharing and commenting. It really means a lot to me to be on this journey with you. So I'll talk to you again next week. Thanks so much. Have a beautiful, beautiful week of realizations ahead. All the love. Bye.